You're listening to another episode of Not Good Enough, an inadequate response to inadequate responses. I am Mitch Alexander. Here with me today is...
Evie.
And
Tom Lang.
And very special guest...
Tom Tanuki.
And we've got Tom McLean as producer this time around, keeping silent.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's nice. I'm watching a large group of very charming people all talk to each other. I've started my podcast recently. I was arrogant enough to think that I could do it all on my own. You know? Now I sit here and I feel shame looking at you all.
Nah, the only reason we can do it is because there's more than one of us doing it. Not one of us individually could probably pull it off. But
Yeah, you have the advantage that you can do yours while also playing a video game.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah, so let's just say up front, so you've got your own podcast, which we called out a little while ago, The Pork and Feed the Birds.
The Pork and Feed the Birds.
And
yeah,
you're also the, I suppose, like co-founder of Yelling at Racist Dogs?
the chairman, the generalissimo. No. But yes, I did co-found it with Sean Bedlam in 2017. And that's, I suppose, comedic, anti-fascist, direct action-ish.
Yeah.
When you say direct action, people think that means you're bashing people or breaking laws. It doesn't necessarily have to. Nevertheless, anti-fascist group in opposition to alt-right types.
Yeah, if you're anyone listening wondering what the directive of Yelling at Racist Dogs is, it's in the name.
It does exactly what it says on the packet. It's very, very straightforward. Yes.
It's really cool to have you here, man, to have a chat about all things.
It's nice to be here. Thank you very much. Yeah,
So-
I particularly like the purview of the podcast as well. It's something that I, in another way through the Pork and Feed the Birds, was sort of similarly motivated to try and start talking to other people about. So
Yeah.
amazing.
And that's one of our, I think, points of this podcast is like, we're not doing anything special. We're doing this because it's something that has to be done, but we're not particularly like the most qualified people in the world to do it. But
Totally.
the more people out there yelling about how the world can be fixed and be better is probably the better.
Yeah, that's it. And particularly if you're reaching out to other people who know more, like I've been trying to do that with every episode rather than forcing people to listen to my dulcet tones. Although now you're forcing all your listeners to listen to my dulcet tones.
Very happy
Lucky
for the
them.
We're very happy for the dulcet tones. They are extremely. So, bit of news up top, I guess. First things first, Australia's still on fire.
Just a little less this time. We're down from 60 to 42 fires.
Whoa.
That's pretty good.
It's about
Cool.
a third. 17 are still uncontained. The conditions appear to have turned in New South Wales because they've had a lot of heavy rain in the last couple of days. Unfortunately, this has now brought the threat of flash flooding.
Just once, and I think I might have stolen this from Twitter, I just want some weather that wasn't in the Bible. You know?
No, we're getting the locusts next. So things are not as bad as they were last week, but they're still not great.
Which we should say as well, we're recording this on a Sunday, and that information was from at least this morning, but all subject to change. The way these things sort of go, it's just like, oh no, we're all on fire again.
That's true. Although it is nice because the flash flooding disproves climate change.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
that's
that's good, yeah.
cold weather.
Yeah.
And every time it's raining, then that's that's what I've learned from the deniers. So
It was-
it's good to hear. You can probably stop the podcast.
Absolutely. And the plague of frogs ate the plague of locusts.
Yeah.
So there's no plague.
That's just nature.
In another piece of news, the ongoing Australian corruption.
Everything.
We call it a scandal, but it's sort of just like, we're just used to it now.
The ongoing corruption government.
Yeah.
We're not calling it
the
sports
government
rorts anymore.
doing exactly what they were created to do.
Yeah, exactly. So Bridget McKenzie of the quote-unquote sports rort scandal was largely reported on as having resigned from the government. The Signal, an ABC podcast, reported that she resigned. We've also got from ABC News a headline, Bridget McKenzie's ministerial career comes to a sudden end after an unexpected rise.
Career came to a sudden end. Okay.
The Canberra Times had McKenzie resigns after investigation finds new conflict of interest. The Australian also reported Bridget McKenzie quits, falling down on accountability. And what does that mean if you are a member of the elected government? It means you can get re-elected as the Nationals leader in the Senate.
Yeah.
Which is what happened to Bridget McKenzie.
So,
Nice.
when she resigned from that that cabinet position. She's
Yeah.
still a member of government. She's still in her party. She's still a big money-earning, decision-making Australian government person.
They often say when someone resigns from their cabinet position, oh, they're on the backbench, as if that means they're demoted somehow. They're still not. They're still making decisions. They still get to vote on things.
They're in the room.
They're in the room.
They're there.
They still get their salary. They still get their money. They're still going to get a parliamentary pension after they eventually leave Parliament. Nothing of any consequence has actually happened.
I think that the senator should be rewarded. Doing exactly what she was supposed to do. I think
She probably has been.
Yeah, in a way. You know, she got. I mean, people. I saw someone posting on Twitter a while ago. Some political opinion columnist or what have you. I can't remember who they were, but they were saying that Aussies seem to accept and expect a degree of corruption from their politicians. We just have a tacit acceptance that at the top tier levels of power that people will make decisions and use their power to benefit their mates or their vested interests and what have you. I think
it's the powerlessness we have where we're like, but what do you do? You know?
Yeah.
I think the point where that started was Howard. As soon as the Tampa affair happened and he realised that, he could just do things and get away with it.
Yeah.
That was the point where he was like, okay, well, we may as well just do these things because we don't have to quit.
That's right.
And
you don't
now
have
we
to...
just sort of accept that if someone does something screwed up or steals money, they're just going to go and keep on doing what they're doing.
Yeah, the default response is if you just don't make a fuss when people get angry at you for it and don't apologise too much, because apologising means that they're right.
They're right.
Yeah.
Then it'll just go away.
Yeah. And they found out the formula now. So
Yeah. It works globally.
And isn't it that Barnaby Joyce, who was the guy before who resigned in disgrace because he was found to be doing, what was he doing? Giving jobs to his staffer who he had a kid with and things. He resigned, but now he's been promoted back to fill the gap left by Bridget McKenzie, who just resigned. And maybe when Barnaby Joyce has another scandal, she'll pop back up. So, what are we doing here? That's not really meaningful at all.
Yeah, I think it's the only reason I want to call it out in this part of the news, and we don't have to, languish on it anymore because it's kind of depressing. But just yes, the government sucks and we have come to expect it. But from the media class, do a better job of reporting. Some people, when people read a headline that says that she resigned, they don't then expect her to be the leader of the Senate. They expect her to not have a career in politics. So be very specific. Just say she left one position and just was able to demote herself in a way no one else in any other job can do.
Attack these people and attack them constantly.
Yeah, exactly.
Be really vicious about it. They control the top tier levels of power in the nation. They should be viciously attacked mercilessly when they do things like this, but they're not by the media. It's amazing.
If I attack them, I might not be able to get to the winter ball.
Yeah.
You're right.
So-
I'm sorry I didn't think of that.
I've got this cool suit.
One thing I do want to point out is that all those articles that we talked about, they do actually have in the body of the article, resigned from cabinet, is on the backbench, etc., etc.
Sometimes.
But sometimes. I don't think it had on the podcast. They didn't mention that.
No.
But the substantive part of an article most people don't read. They see the headline, she resigned.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, that problem's solved. I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you resign in disgrace from 7-Eleven, you're not in the shop anymore. You no longer work on that paycheck.
I've gone back to night fill.
Yeah.
I'm no longer manager.
Yeah, there's a degree of responsibility that you carry about what you put into the headline of an article. I mean, they do say that 60 to 70% of all shares, at least on Facebook, are not clicked to be opened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have time anymore.
I'm guilty of that
Yeah,
constantly.
completely.
And in the last piece of news, Tom McLean, the famed host of the Not Good Enough podcast, was proven right in record time. In episode 2, at the 11-minute, 23-second mark, Tom's quoted as saying, I reckon within, let's say, 4 months, they'll be back to denial. By the 19th of May, we'll be back to the position of there's a discussion. And it was just in reference to when all the bushfires were happening, it was obviously a terrible time.
Yeah.
And the Liberal government came out saying, we've always said there's a problem with climate change. We've always said there's climate change.
Obviously, things have changed, but we need to adapt.
Yeah. And so and Tom
said there was a problem. You were just hearing me wrong.
bullshit. And McLean said, in 4 months' time, they'll go back to it. Well, it was about 2.5 weeks. In February 5th, Peter Dutton, obviously, as we've all pointed out, we're experiencing hotter weather, longer summers. But did the bushfires start in some of these regions because of climate change? No. It started because someone lit a match. There are 250 people, as I understand it, or more, that have been charged with arson. That's not climate change. That's also not true.
It's a straight up lie. It's like it's a Facebook post that's just gone viral with boomers that he's saying for the record on TV.
Peter Dutton is reading out Facebook posts to the nation.
Which his department put these numbers out, and these are not the numbers that he's quoted, wasn't it? Or maybe it's not his department, but they certainly said
the AFP,
these are how many people who...
Yeah, the AFP said not a single one of these megafires was caused by an arsonist.
Or a tiny minority, perhaps, but not 250 people and not a significant proportion of the fires.
Yeah.
But hey, we don't care even if they all were, because the thing that started the fire is not the same as the thing that propelled them to become bigger than ever before.
That's the other thing as well. Like, fires will start. I don't know who is so obsessed with like the idea that climate change, which was only ever about making things worse, can be like lighting tinder in the Australian outback and scurrying off. Like, yeah, gotcha. I was like, no, like the fires are going to start in May. No, the problem is that they're so much worse because of climate change. And the fact that no journalist is like, yeah, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the start of the fires. We're talking about the reason why they're so intense. We just sort of let them go. It's like, oh, arsonists, really? 250 of them. Do you have any names? No.
What are they going to say when the fires happen again next year?
200 more arsonists.
More arsonists.
same
A
thing.
legion of arsonists.
Yeah,
Well, we
country
had
of
worse
firebugs.
fires.
Craven firebugs just marching out every summer.
We're going to have to build bigger jails for all these arsonists.
Yeah.
Just saw a monkey paw curl.
Just put the jails next to the coal mines, get that free labour. Yeah, let's not.
I mean, let's just start having a chat about what you do best. Your whole...
My thing, what do I do? What do I do? You know, what I do has changed over time. I think I've sort of been actively organising, doing anti-fascist stuff since 2016. And back then, it was all very much flag, cape wearing, you know, sort of Aussie flag painted, Ned Kelly
Your
helmet
Cronulla
donning.
types, real patriots.
Cronulla types, that's right. You know, you had the really big rise of Reclaim Australia and the Patriot movement here, sort of copying what was happening in, you know, the flash rise of them in America and the UK. You know, that began here in 2015. And to be honest, I think I thought it would be a flash in the pan. At that point, it might go away, and I really wasn't that involved. But by 2016, I realised that wasn't happening. And after attending the Coburg protests, which, you know, some of you may recall as being the protests where there was, you know, a lot of violence between the then True Blue crew and anti-fascist activists at the time. That went around the nation. Everyone got very angry. They're both as bad as each other. Why are they all wearing masks? And then not long after that, I started out by doing a piss-taking fake nationalist group called the Million Flag Patriots, which was an attempt to I guess, to actually compete with real patriot groups by doing everything that they did, but in a fake way. So we did rallies, we would show up to their rallies, we would do videos, we sold fake flags with just more stars and stuff, called the triple flag.
It was like a green and purple flag, I remember. With all
there were
the
different
stars.
variants, different ensigns of the triple flag. Yeah, there was a beach one that you had to wear at the beach, so we said, otherwise you would be shot by the Australian government. It was called neo-patriotism. It was just patriotism on acid, because I think that if you took what they were saying at the time, which was so earnest and angry, but instead of disagreeing with them, what we were really enjoying doing with Million Flag Patriots was just agreeing so fucking hard that it becomes really just lunacy.
It's like the classic bit of fighting conspiracy theorists by being like, you don't think they landed on the moon? You believe in the moon?
That's right. That's right. What moon? That's painted on.
Bought in.
So that went for a while, but but, things change. Alt-right organisation changes. The flag capes eventually came off. We went into an era of rock star racists coming out here like Lauren Southern, Milo Yiannopoulos, and suddenly it was a very monetised, privatised...
Racists got organised.
That's right, thing, And so that's where Yelling at Racist Dogs, or YARD, came out in late 2017. We needed to change our tactics. We needed to deal with the proliferation of right-wing, alt-right video makers.
Kind of. Because their whole thing, I guess, is that they're pretending that they're reasonable thinking people. They're not these people yelling on the streets, but actually they are. They're saying the same thing. They're riling up those people.
That's right.
And so I guess if you point out, and if you keep combating them, it takes away the purpose of being those suit-wearing types.
Yeah, totally. Well, they changed the socioeconomic tier. Suddenly they were appealing to people who had more money, which makes sense if you want to actually make money off them and you want to put your events inside private auditoriums or venues where you don't have to deal with the coppers and with people trying to hit you and things like that.
I guess if you want to get into government, you can't have one of these flag-wearing guys in the government. You got to have someone who looks like they belong in government.
That's right. And a lot of those people, from that old flag-waving days were just, they had been effectively their ability to canvass and to bring new concerned mums and dads. That was the Channel 7 description of Reclaim Australia from 2015. Well, all the violence that we'd seen on the telly had completely deterred all of those concerned mums and dads. So the Patriot movement wasn't working out, and it was fundamentally a Facebook movement. And then when the United Patriots front page got deleted in early to mid-2017, well, they just lost their ability to bring any people out to rallies anymore.
So before we go on to the specific extra stuff, I just want to know, do you know what's happened to those cape-wearing people that were at the Reclaim Australia rally, the loud, punchy racists that were there? What are they doing now?
Oh, man. It was always really interesting back then. I was always interested in what got them in. And you would go to Facebook pages or Instagram timelines, and it'd actually be quite sad because you'd be looking at very garden variety dads who, all the posts were just the backyard pool, going down to the barbie with the wife and the kids, and then in about 2015, suddenly there'd be one or two Aussie flag memes, and then 3 or 4, and then suddenly there's a picture of them in their fresh new TBC jersey that they just purchased for $250 with the embroidered Aussie flags all over it, and suddenly the average family life completely disappears as they've been swept up into these movements. Which make no mistake, for many people is a social thing. Collective anti-racist or anti-fascist organising is completely different to individualist ones, because you're dealing with people for whom racism isn't just their things they've read online. Yeah. It becomes their birthday parties and their social circles. It becomes all their best mates and their christenings and their this and their that. Their social circle becomes that. But the more that whole movement became unpalatable or unsustainable for them, well, some of those guys have just gone back again. So their Instagram timelines have gone back to the barbecues.
Well, that's good. That's nice. That's very wholesome. I'm glad that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of...
As long as they don't hear about QAnon.
Can I say, yeah, well, that's the thing. It's just, it's a... there's... I think that alt-right groups or far-right closed-circuit groups these days look like groups where disparate people with very different conspiracy theory interests. So one guy's the rabid anti-vaxxer, another one has this obsession that if there's a tear on the edge of the Australian flag, then the Constitution isn't valid. Another one, just thinks that he's obsessed with dads going through the family court. Why can't we say our kids are bloody feminists? So they've all got very different entry points, but they're very supportive with each other. They're all like, oh, that's interesting. They kind of all goad each other along while having common threads of Agenda 21 or the United Nations. But I miss the good old days of the violent ones, the True Blue Crew. I do.
You stood.
You know, they'd do things with you. They'd go, oh, it's Christmas. Let's just leave it out, you know? Like, oh, we'll give it a break. It's Christmas. Yeah, I miss them.
Come out of the
these
trenches,
new
play
ones.
some footy.
Yeah, these new stalky nerds that come out these days, they've got instead of just having bashed everyone all their lives, now they'll like go and pay for private lessons with a kickboxer just so as they can hopefully fight an anti-fascist one day.
So to try and talk about what your more recent interests, where they might lie, I wanted to bring up that you were at the IMARC protests.
I was, yeah.
So what was your experience there?
Should we bit of background on the IMARC protest
Yeah.
for anyone who might not be aware of it? That was it was a convention of mining executives
Yep.
and people from the industry in Melbourne, and it was protested and kind of blockaded by sort of environmental, sort of anti-corporate greed kind of groups.
Over
Yeah.
quite a few days.
Yep. So, and it was a pretty strong coalition of environmental activists, other forms of social justice activists who, you know, might not regularly be around environmental action, but I think, you know, with climate change and what have you, the need to galvanise around those kinds of actions is starting to be prioritised amongst different kinds of groups more. And yeah, and anti-fascist activists were there as well, and it was incredible.
Do you feel like there was like a bigger police presence than there was, say, at any of the Extinction Rebellion protests that have happened?
Well, you say Extinction Rebellion. This is of course there were, but that's the thing. The whole Extinction Rebellion, Spring Rebellion thing had just meant that there was a. You know, it wasn't too long after an Extinction Rebellion person had been belted in a subway in London, if you recall.
Yeah.
Being dragged off a train and being attacked because they were stopping all those working class people from getting home. So people's appetite for things like Extinction Rebellion was at a pretty low point. And the police, when they were at IMARC, the protest to the blockade of the mining conference, they were pretty much let off the lead. They were told, I believe that they were told that they could do pretty much whatever the hell they like. And in fact, what we heard from police liaisons at that blockade was that they weren't even getting orders from up top as to what they should do. Right. So when you have a team like the Port team, the Public Order Response team, who are
pretty hardcore.
They're pretty hardcore. They've got thin blue line kind of badges on them. One of them had a sticker that said "Eat a dick, hippie" on his body cam.
Because they're not the standard like cops you'll see in the CBD. These are like riot police, effectively.
They are riot police. They go to training to deal with suppressing Marxist scum like me, you know, and anyone else at these rallies, and they are ideologically, you know, many of them anyway, are ideologically in line with that. They're quite anti-activist.
For context for non-Victorian and international listeners, Victoria has a specific stream of the police force that is dedicated to public order.
Yeah, and they look like a cross between like Judge Dredd and a hockey goalie. Like they've just got these like ridiculous pads and this whole big thing, like the jackboot looking like super tough, like heat
Very
man,
security.
pop.
Yeah.
Like I've done cosplay and stuff before. Like you would feel pretty cool putting it on.
man.
If you're
They look cool. I get pretty flustered when I see them. I really do.
In the back of the car, they've got the shotguns. They've probably got all sorts of fun toys.
Yeah.
They
Even if
do. They've got amazing guns.
Yeah.
They've got really cool guns all ready to use on us.
They got the mean horses.
Yeah, they get the mean horses that like buck people off unless it's their guy. Not like the normal police horses, which are, I don't know, super cool.
They're for PR. Yeah. Here's Constable Klops.
And they are there to suppress these actions. And they were particularly there to suppress anything that went down at IMARC. I mean, on day one, in that morning, they were leading police horses into very tightly packed scrums of activists and someone got both of their legs broken.
Yeah.
And of course that happened because they didn't have anywhere to go. And that's what happens if you lead a police horse directly into a very tight group of people.
I mean, that's medieval combat 101. A horse is a weapon of war.
A horse is a weapon of war.
You cannot stand up to a horse.
No, and I'd never really seen. When I was one of the first actions I ever attended back in my youth was the S11 protests in 2000. And I recall the police horses being used in that same way there. But that day was chaos. That was unbelievable. I was seeing windows being smashed left, right and centre. I saw someone punch a police horse the entire thing. It was a very long time ago and it was a very chaotic day. But I haven't really seen them use police horses like that since that time. Not in my recollection anyway, until that day. The point is they were being really, really aggressive because the public, so they thought, had given them licence to because they were sick of their Extinction Rebellion, these dirty hippies out on the streets.
Right.
That's what they thought.
That's the interesting contrast, is the Extinction Rebellion march, which happened only a week or so before then, that was like 200,000 people or something in the CBD of Melbourne. Police presence was very low. There were a lot of cops there, but they were very much standing back, just directing people. There were no horses. There was no riot police. It was your kind of nice CBD, we're here to just make sure you do the right thing.
Yeah.
But in a hands-off kind of way, cops. And that was a huge amount of people, but they kind of just let them do their thing and then go out of the way. But once you have quite a small group of people actually at an industry important event, suddenly it's like, screw this, the gloves are off and the horses are out.
Well, it's almost as though the most important thing to the state is protecting the interests of big mining sector industry. You know what I mean? As though that is more vital to them than even protecting the public transport of the CBD.
And you can see what they actually think is going to have an impact on the mining industry. Is it 200,000 people marching through the city peacefully, or is it a small group of people actually blockading an industry?
Who are quite aggressive. Because all the arguments didn't apply. They weren't blocking any ambulances, although that didn't really happen anyway. No. You know, even with the Extinction Rebellion protests, they weren't really blocking all that many people. And you know what? I mean, I understand Extinction Rebellion pushed it too far with their whole sort of stopping the working class from getting to things, and they really did. You know, people's appetite for being stopped all the time simply waned. And then, you know, they copped it. You know, some of them very physically. They copped it. They targeted. They were seen to be targeting ordinary people going to work instead of the big business and what have you. That's right.
Is that not like? That's 90% media narrative, though. Like, of course, like I've seen people complain, oh, well, Extinction Rebellion were on my way to work and I didn't, it took me an extra 30 minutes to try and get a route around their sit-in. But for me, the most galling thing as well is not just the presence that was there, but the depiction of, well, Extinction Rebellion, we don't like it, but it's still a peaceful protest. They're doing it the right way. It's still 200 people, peacefully moved along different streets, and they go home at the end of the day. Whereas, of course, for something like IMARC, it's people who are there specifically to disrupt, as opposed to just ruining someone's route for the day.
Totally, hey. I mean, I was really in support and certainly wasn't standing against the whole Extinction Rebellion experiment. You know what I mean? I was interested to see how it panned out. Things like the aesthetics of the movement and their approach towards police officers was not my cup of tea, but I was still happy to see how it went because it's a
popular support thing. It's really good for getting everybody kind of on board.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I mean, obviously the intent there was to use and to waste the resources of the system through putting tons of people through the court system and out on the streets and, wasting police resources and what have you, to the degree I could see that with XR, that it was supposed to be to overburden that system, therefore pressuring the government.
All these old grandmas getting arrested, people go, hang on a sec, that's a bit interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
And getting arrested now for protesting climate change, that's pretty cool. And so I think,
I understand what it was trying to do.
Kind of the end point.
Yeah, yeah. But at the end of the day, it seems that the system is more than enough well-resourced to handle people going through the court system and to handle people going out to rallies, because VicPol and the Port team are very, very well-resourced to deal with activists and what have you, or to arrest lots of people.
My biggest concern as well with the arrests is not just the older people getting arrested, but young kids being brought into the legal system, getting arrest records. I feel like that can only be a bad thing.
How do they know what they're getting into?
Exactly.
Yeah. How do they know what the rest of their life is going to be like? I mean, you know, at the same time, the rest of their life might not be very great if everywhere's just on fire from now on all the time. So if indeed we are potentially in the end times or something approaching it, then I understand the need for people to start doing something. But it is interesting to see the contrast between XR and then people who are more aggressive about big business getting brutally suppressed at IMARC. Hey?
So in terms of like that brutal suppression, what got me was, like you said, like they are well resourced, and they were sort of, you know, let off the leash, so to speak, with, you know, the horses going through and breaking legs and whatnot. But there seemed to be a personal level of aggression. Like, it seems like some of those people that had the capes on just joined VicPol.
Yeah.
And then started to just get amongst it again, because there was just viciousness in some of their eyes. And there's footage out there of like protesters being king hit by big cops or being smashed with batons. And like, so just, I suppose, like, what I wanted to ask you then is, I suppose, like the tie-in between state oppression as it leads to fascism and the support of individuals in that system. Like, it seems like there is a direct link between not only, VicPol with their fascist tendencies and the way they enact laws, but also just like, there are just some cops that seem like they like hitting people.
Yeah, some of those cops. You remember the one that I released some information about him as from his personal Facebook. Yeah, a bit of a doxing. Well, a little bit, just a little, kind of a little doxing as a treat. And he was only one of a pretty a tight circle of other coppers. I mean, we haven't released their details, but they're all quite alt-right in nature, and they're all Port team people. We found a pretty alt-right police prosecutor. Stay tuned. We'll probably have to, these things are in the public interest because they're reflective of, these are the people who are suppressing you at rallies. You're out there in the public, you're advocating for a cause, you're there at the blockade, you may be still quite peaceful about it, but those guys were there with stuff emblazoned on them. Eat a dick hippie on a copper at a protest? Yeah, I hope we haven't all forgotten how surreal that is. And they were so aggressive the whole time. Just having been there, like you can't film absolutely everything. I'm sure if you somehow managed to get everyone's footage together, we would have seen a lot more of their violence. But it was non-stop. They were so aggro,
They're trying to get a reaction. They want to get the pepper spray out.
Oh, and they were very generous with it. There was a thing, that they were very, very generous. We were all given a generous helping of pepper on those days. The sheerest violence I think I saw was right at the end of the rally when we thought we were all done. It's because two young people all scaled up and they put a banner up regarding, the blockade of IMARC. And this was right towards the end. And the police, this was after the whole Travis Gray thing had come out, and it was after all the footage of the police violence had been released, and this was the last day of the blockade, and they were backing down on that last day. But they had decided right at the end that they would be getting those two protesters. They wanted them. So as they were scaling back down, the police started coming up to collect them. But then all the activists came in to stand around the poles that they were scaling back in on, and that's when it became absolutely chaotic. One of them got away. They managed to break free of their harness and absolutely piss bolt down the Yarra. And I found out later on that they got away and we were so happy. But then the police, they really wanted blood, and they were just spraying so much pepper spray into the face of this she's 17, 18-year-old girl, that she couldn't unleash her harnesses even to go away with the police anymore. It was just too late, and they were just coating people in pepper spray. And I thought, this is surreal. I don't know what we're dealing with right now. This is because this person hung a banner up. Yeah. They wanted blood and they wanted revenge for the PR disaster of the first 2 days. That's what we were dealing with there. And that kind of relationship where they just want to suppress you or they want to get revenge on you, I've seen that at a lot of rallies. It's only getting worse.
Is this perhaps like some of the worst sort of retributive action that you've seen? Yes, they're getting rougher, they're getting more violent. They were very, very aggressive at IMARC. I have seen that kind of thing many times before in other instances. I've seen them be very liberal with the pepper spray, but that's at events like, say, Coburg, for example, where they're really quite, the actual event was really aggressive and there was a lot of conflict going on there. The blockade IMARC one, to me, the disconnect between what I saw as the peacefulness of the protesters. They were loud and shouty. We all were, but they were pretty damn peaceful. Yeah. The disconnect between their peaceful approach and the sheer aggression of the police, that's what really struck me about IMARC. Yeah. I'm like, we're into a different tier of state suppression right now, you know.
And people say clashes between protesters and cops, but it's like, if you're an unarmed, un-everything protester there, you're not going to be clashing with a riot cop.
Yeah.
It's a bit one-sided.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were an 18-year-old uni student is clashing with an armoured mega cop. What is that? Are we going to accept that that's like an equal thing, you know? Like this child is clashing with RoboCop. This is on a horse, on an armoured horse. I know who I'd bet on in that bloody... in that confrontation.
Protesters and tanks.
Yeah.
So then what do you reckon draws people to fascism like on this level? So I think it's almost self-evident. Like what draws the leaders to fascism? Well, unlimited power, that's really cool. But what draws the lackeys?
So you mean sort of like grassroots level?
Yeah, I just don't know who signs up to be like, I want to be dominated by one guy in charge.
Yeah.
Like what sort of mentality do you think drives that in people? Just like, yeah, let me do your entire bidding so long as I get to be violent.
Well, there's a very fertile fake news network through Facebook and various other platforms that's been doing its level best to galvanise people into an alt news kind of conspiracy theory network for several years now. I think that the social media platforms have been doing a great job of being a conduit for people to leave. I heard a panel once, and this was many years ago, mind you, and one of the people in this panel said they talked about the world that we live in nowadays. Imagine that someone really loves Hello Kitty and they only look at pages related to Hello Kitty through their social media. They're on forums, so all of their friends are Hello Kitty fans, and all of the news that they read about and all the things they talk about is Hello Kitty news, Hello Kitty subjects, Hello Kitty this, Hello Kitty that. They only go onto Hello Kitty merch websites, so all the things that they buy are Hello Kitty stuff, all of their favourites, all of their tailored news feed, Hello Kitty, Hello Kitty, Hello Kitty. That person has more allegiance to Hello Kitty than they do to anything else that's going on in mainstream news or otherwise in the present day, and that's very easy to do. And then if you think about that, and that's what a lot of people live like. But if you replace Hello Kitty with the United Patriots Front or Al Qaeda, then you have half of the problems. People are able to. That's it, yeah. And, social media exists allowing you to tailor your news feed, and it helps you to tailor your news feed so that you stay on it. And that's really what leads people to go down that path as much as any other.
So do you think then that, like, they are the closest to being brought into a more workers-centred socialist, coalition, or they're the furthest from it? Like, are they more susceptible to just good messaging and the left and workers just haven't been giving out the right type of signalling? Or do you think it speaks more to a type of person who is almost but not entirely lost to that sort of workers' coalition cause?
Oh, look, the question as to what can galvanise disaffected people, God, it's one, I suppose it's the core question that we're all asking ourselves. Hey, I'll tell you what I think about that once we see how, say, the Sanders campaign runs in America, I still think if you say someone's disaffected, and often we talk about disaffected, what did they say after Trump? All the disaffected voters, and what they mean by that is they mean broke white people.
Yeah.
That they had no other option but to go for Trump. But then again, these news networks and these old sort of paid alt news conduits into the right were convincing people that Trump was speaking to them as disaffected people.
Yeah.
And these are very well-paid networks, I think that those people are, at the end of the day, workers. We've got to look at what it is that's convincing them away from the fact that they're the working class. White supremacy convinces you it fucks with white people too, because it gives you a false sense of supremacy in a world where actually you've got fuck all.
The step to hating immigrants versus hating bosses seems like that's where the sort of divide goes, and it just seems like it should be it should be the project to just make us no, you don't hate immigrants or you don't hate this different religion, you hate your boss.
That's what the Sanders campaign focuses on. It's the whole not me, not us, or fight for someone you don't know.
I think it's just that, and I think it's absolutely the right analogy is you've got the disaffected youth and they want somewhere to belong. I mean, we've probably all been disaffected youth of some sort of another. Some people, the thing that gets them in might be, a religion that is like, hey, you're part of this group now. We believe in you. You're going to be, and that can go to all the way to terrorism, or it might be, your Jordan Peterson types who say you belong. You're part of this. This is how you can make life good. It might be populist fascism.
Punk
it might
rock.
Be punk rock, exactly.
Yeah.
You want somewhere to belong. You want people who say, you're okay, you're one of us, even though you feel weird and bad. We feel weird and bad in the same way. And we can give you a solution to that. Or you can have your Bernie Sanders populist socialism, which is you feel bad because of capitalism. We've got the answer to that. It's taxing billionaires. Join us. We're all on your side. And so I think you've just got to be able to get your message to disaffected people at that right time, which basically means at any time.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask the third Tom that we've got here.
Such a proliferation of Toms.
But again, just to double back, do you think that those angry older people that were at Reclaim Australia or that were cops at IMARC or whatever else are the same, are disaffected youth, or is it it's a different type of anger now for them, or can we still reach them, Tom?
They can be reached. Disaffected, broke people who are frustrated with the world that they're in can be reached. I think that there's been it's not that it's wrong, it's probably not that it's wasteful, but it has been a bit of a waste of time. It's something that the left needed to get past, and it's the battle between, I suppose, class essentialism, for want of a better word, versus race or identity essentialism, as in people saying there is no war but the class war, versus people saying to those people, no, hang on, you're ignoring the role of white supremacy in influencing history. However, the reality of the matter is that the entire history of race theory and racism is inherently rooted in extractive capitalism. I mean, it started, after all, about 400 years ago to make slavery more, a more profitable and a more marketable commodity for the slavers, Race theory and racism became more entrenched and more, it became a more solid doctrine every time black and white people in America would try and revolt to stop being, shoved into a slave class. Right after that, there would always be 10 to 15 years after that in the history of America, and it's very interesting, there'd always be advances in the classification of the races, always after that. Because how do you shut up the broke white people what they discovered was that you can give the white ones this false sense of supremacy by anointing them with this caste system that actually doesn't confer any money upon these people. It doesn't confer any rights upon them, but that does distinguish them from the black people.
And I suppose it's like colonization in general. Okay, we're getting into broader territories. Colonization in general was all about capital. It was about, there's a new continent here we can exploit for money and stuff. It wasn't there's a new continent here we can kill everybody. I mean, obviously they were fine with that, but it was mostly they'd be fine if those people weren't there. They just wanted the stuff.
Yeah.
But hey.
Hey, what are you going to do, eh? Look,
we're all in there.
What we do with Yard has been for several years, has been trying to make the alt-right or what have you less palatable by trying to make the efforts of the alt-right grifting, camera-wielding video makers less palatable. So you got Avi Yemeni, for example. He went to IMARC. He goes out to protests all the time. He's really just selling himself. But the more successful he can be, the more successful this kind of like ultra-Zionist, light kind of nationalism can be as well. And he's trying to do that by ridiculing left rallies. So we stop what he's doing. We reduce the quality of his footage in order to, it fucks with his subscriber count, sure, but it also does stop these distractions and these grifters from interfering with and ridiculing successful and growing left movements. Because we're not like a couple of years ago, are we? The most successful growing protest movements of the past year have all been left ones. That's good news to me,
So I wanted to talk about eco-fascism now. And now
let's talk about eco-fascism.
With your new interest, well, it's not really your new interest, it's more just pivoting into environmental protest.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And what can you see coming? Well, like if you look into now after IMARC, if you look into your crystal ball and think about how people want to protest capital.
Yeah.
And when they want to get into getting into protests that may actually disrupt things, how do you see that coming into effect?
I saw there was some anarchist shit stirrers somewhere in Melbourne the other day who put posters up going free Ted Kaczynski. I'm like, oh dearie me. But what is Ted? What is the Unabomber? I've read his manifesto before. I would say he's an eco-terrorist, and although he's gained a lot of ground with eco-fascists because he's got a noted anti-PC left bent in his manifesto, and he doesn't like the political correctness. He doesn't like the soft left and that kind of thing. He doesn't like the left's obsession of the 80s and the 90s with social issues like human rights and what have you. He's not interested. He was interested in blowing things up to thwart the rise of technology. That's eco-terrorism, but it's palatable to eco-fascists who are kind of like, well, look, the history of Nazis is tied in with eco-fascism, really, because they had that whole blood and soil thing, didn't they? This like mystic connection between race and country. It's easy for them to play upon those ideas of they like making this false, contrast between the inherently hierarchical beauty of nature and then the, degenerate modern society full of, Marxists like us who are ruining nature. That's the contrast that eco-fascism tries to put there.
I feel like it's like the final stage of what you were saying before, which is like at first like all the Unite the Right rallies, they were a bit like appealing to people who are a bit disaffected. Mm-hmm. And now we're at the point where eco-fascism is going to be implemented by the highest possible conservative power, which is capital. So it's actually by government and by corporations and the ways in which they do that.
Totally. People like Marine Le Pen and what have you over in Europe. There's many powers over in Europe or many senior far-right politicians who are saying, we're going to have to start getting strong on defending borders when all the waves of climate migrants start coming through. Forget about the climate change deniers. They are going to start dropping off one by one. They will be replaced by eco-fascists. That is going to happen.
And I think about all the rich billionaires who are buying up properties in climate slightly less affected places like New Zealand because they see it, they know that it's, climate change is coming. So they're sort of building up their places where to escape to.
Oh, they are set. They're
they're
going to
ready.
be fine. They are going to be fine. I'm so happy for them.
Can I just say, and I reckon that there's probably kind of two sorts of eco-fascists and the one that I see that's probably the one that we have to worry about here in Australia are the ones who are fascist first and then will use the eco stuff as an excuse for that.
Yeah.
Because when they say, hey, we've got to stop refugees because it's going to increase our emissions or they're going to use our water or something. They don't actually give a shit about the emissions or the water.
No.
They just want to stop the refugees.
That's right.
And when they say something like, we've got to build more dams or we've got to have more gas-fired power stations because it'll reduce emissions or it'll save water. No, they don't give a shit. They just want to make some money. And they don't actually have an opinion on climate change or the things to do to stop it. Because if they actually did want to stop climate change, there are better ways to do it.
Totally. You're speaking about the fundamental opportunism of fascists.
Exactly.
And they are like, I've always said this, fascists are like the political equivalent to me anyway, I think, of like an old man out the back of a truck near a school, like offering candy to the kids nearby. They're like, whatever it takes. That's right. Whereas the, eco-fascism says, we'll do this Malthusian population control thing.
Which is insane. And I want to get into population control at some point too.
Yeah.
There might not be time today. But then I think that when a lot of people say eco-fascists, they hear or they often think, it's people who care about the environment first, and then they're using fascism to as like a last resort. Well, the only way we can save the environment is if we make having kids illegal or something. And I don't think we're going to see that for a while. But I think if we keep going the way we are, then you're going to give fascists more and more excuse to justify their fascist position.
That's it, man. If 2 years ago you were telling me our culture's being replaced, so we have to get rid of the brown people, and now you're telling me the environment's going to go up in flames, so we have to get rid of the brown people. The common thing there is that you've been saying for 2 years, get rid of the brown people. So I know where your real point lies. It's got nothing to do with the environment. That is only and it's going to be increasingally effective as an agitating or a recruitment
Because
tool.
people will get desperate.
That's it.
They'll go,
the
we can
fires,
stop it somehow.
The fires are going to keep happening. Fascism and light fascism, proto-fascism, whatever, these are, compelling things. They're cool. They've got an enemy in there, like that.
It's amazing how when climate change wasn't a big problem and wasn't real and isn't something we have to worry about, well, we can keep burning fossil fuels. But now climate change is important. Well, we absolutely have to keep burning fossil fuels so that we can fix climate change. You don't really care. You just want to burn those fuels.
What I was just going to ask then is climate change is going to give a good excuse to like eco-fascist tendencies, which is also always worth sort of bearing in mind. It's like it's just a type of fascism. The important part is fascism, eco or not. But then, so what do you think is a good counter? What can we do? Please help us.
I have the answer. Good news, everyone. I have the answer. And once you all know this, everything will be fine. Now, look, my take is that the answer to fascist arguments regarding division are unions between different types of opposing kinds of activists. So we started out talking about IMARC. I have a history in anti-fascist stuff, although I like to try and, my real interest these days is in trying to get different kinds of activists working together, because you are more strong when you're in a union. And I don't just mean a trade union, although I fucking wish that the actual fucking trade union movement would fucking take a stand on these matters a little bit more, thank you. And by the way, the fucking Labor Party could do a bit more as well. Jesus fucking Christ. The fucking Labor Party. Let's not get into that.
We're out of time.
We need to all work more together. I went out to IMARC because I thought that, Yard could probably extend into that kind of thing. I think that Yard is good for motivating the troops, making them laugh. It's not the protest movement, but it's an augment to it, that needs to happen more. We need to be building stronger ties between different kinds of positive grassroots activist movements, because we cannot expect Canberra to fucking do anything about this for us. You know, they will become the eco-fascists of the future.
So what you're saying is stopping eco-fascism is exactly the same as stopping vanilla fascism. It's all the same things. Just stop fascism.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Alrighty, let's go into the quick wrap up. So, do you have anything you just want to shout out as a good thing that listeners should check out?
So I recommend the works of Jeff Sparrow. I really, really do, particularly his new one, Fascists Among Us. There is a big nod to eco-fascism in there. I recommend that people Google and read about eco-fascism. I definitely do. I think that you would do well to actually read stuff by people who are called eco-fascists. I don't know if you're happy for me recommending this on your podcast, but I think you should go out and read. I think you should read what Ted Kaczynski wrote, because they put it in the papers back in the 90s to try and stop him from blowing more things up. And I think it's a good take. It's a good way to understand what people who are eco-terrorists / eco-fascists are actually saying. Go to the source. Stop just reading. And this is what a lot of anti-fascists do. Don't just read what lefties have to say about these pricks. Go and read what these pricks are saying. Better the devil you know, I think. And I also think follow movements of people that are trying to galvanise big, grassroots rally type movements, like, uni students for climate justice. And I on my podcast, I try to always put a little bit of a gig guide of rallies that are coming up. I just would really ask that all your listeners actually try and attend those things. It's not the answer. We've got to move on to strikes and things like that. Can't just be peaceful rallies forever. It really can't. Not with the stakes involved right now. But it is a start, and that starts with more and more people rocking up. So
awesome.
Yeah. And if you do want a list of those things, a bit of a gig guide, climatechangeprotests.net.au is worth a look.
Awesome. Hey, Tom, third Tom. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having us, and I have had a great time. Just a long time to say, didn't it?
Plug your stuff explicitly. What do you do?
Look, I would love it if everyone could pop onto my website, tomtanuki.net. I put updates of the videos I do on there. I put updates of the podcasts I do on there. I put updates of the regular articles that I write on there. It's also got a link to my Patreon, and if people want to chuck me a clam or two so that I can be more of a full-time pest and slightly less destitute, that will be absolutely amazing. Also, I chuck a component of that in to pay the rent. Lydia Thorpe and the local people, or Indigenous lot organising in Victoria for Indigenous grassroots causes, doing amazing stuff there. So please follow us, chuck me a clam if you've got one, and listen to all the shit I regularly say online.
We'll put links to all those things in the show notes.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Not Good Enough. You can contact us at NotGoodPod on the socials, or go to notgoodpod.com for contact info and for show notes. Not Good Enough was recorded on the lands of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and sovereignty was never ceded.